Hey everyone, Matt here with Night Run Studio, and in this video on adding music and sound effects, we're going to look at how to trigger a specific song when you get close to an enemy, and then have that song turn off and go back to a default one when you get further away. Let's get started. Getting started, you don't need a whole lot in your scene. You're going to need to have a player who's capable of moving around the scene in order to trigger the music, and you're also going to need an enemy. The enemy doesn't have to have anything special. In fact, at the moment, mine is just an animated sprite and doesn't even have a collider or rigid body, though you can, of course, add those things if you would like. We're actually just going to start here by getting into our script. So if you want to head into your assets folder, I have a scripts folder with sound, and that's where I'll put this script for mine. I'm just going to right click, go to create C# script. I'm going to call this one boss music. Before I go any further, I'm just going to click on my enemy and add this component. All right, with that done, we can open up the script. So getting started, we're going to have to create a couple of references. First of all, since we're playing music, we are going to need to make a public reference to an audio source, and we'll just call this audio source. This will be where the music actually comes from. We're also going to need to make a public audio clip reference, and this will be where we store the actual music we want to play. So I'm going to have one called boss music. And then I'll have a comment, and we'll do another, which will just be the default music for our scene. If you haven't seen this before, you can declare multiple variables in one declaration by using a comma between them, so you don't have to write public audio clip over and over again. I always like to set my scripts up so that they find as many of the references as they can on their own. So I'm going to tell it where to find the audio source in our start. So as soon as the game begins, we're going to do a search to find our audio source. Now, we haven't put this in the game yet, however, in a moment I will put it on my enemy. So I just want the enemy to check itself for a component called audio source as soon as the game begins, of course, which is why we're putting it in the start method. Now, with those things done, you can click on your enemy. And first of all, let's add our audio source. Now, I could drag this audio source up here into the box. However, we don't even need to do that. You'll notice that as soon as we started the game, our boss music script automatically filled that in for us. Now, while we're here, we'll just quickly fill in the different music here. I have a folder where I keep track of all of my own music, and I don't have specific boss music at this point, but we'll just grab a couple of things for the moment. So I'll start with some peaceful music as our default, which I can put down here. I'll also grab that peaceful music, and I'm just going to put it on my audio source to begin with and make it play on awake so that it starts right away. I'll then grab some little more upbeat music to become my boss music. All right, let's pop back into our script. So essentially all we want to do now is make it so that once we get within range of the enemy, he changes the music. So we're not going to need the update method here, so we can get rid of that. And instead we're going to need an on trigger. So I'm just going to start typing on trigger, enter, and I can just click on trigger, enter 2D, hit enter, and it will write that syntax for me. Now this is on the enemy, so we want him to check to see if the thing he's just collided with is a game object that has a tag equal to player. So if the player has entered this trigger area, then we want something to happen. And don't forget to make that a double equal sign. And essentially all we want to do is make it so that if the player comes within the trigger area, we just want to set some new music up. So we're going to go audio source dot clip. So we will have to tell it what its new clip is going to be. Will be equal to boss music. And then we want to tell our audio source that it can now play that clip. We will also want to switch the music back when we leave the trigger. And I'll start typing on trigger again, but this time we're going to use on trigger exit 2D. Make sure that you are using the 2D version, as the other ones will not work. And we're going to essentially do the exact same thing we did here. So if it's the player that is exiting, we want to play default music. Now, one other little thing you can do here, this is not necessary, but I like to do it, is in my start method, I'm actually going to have this script automatically detect the default music. So default music is equal to audio source dot clip. This just saves you from having to drag the specific song into the default music slot in every single instance where you put the enemy in, so that if you have this enemy in different scenes, at the start of the scene it will auto-detect what the default music is in that scene and load it in. Now back in Unity, we'll just have to actually establish our trigger, and I'll do that by clicking on my enemy. I'm just going to minimize these other scripts for a moment. And we're going to add a collider here. Now you can choose what you want to do. You may want a circle collider so that it checks an equal distance vertically and horizontally. I prefer to use a box collider 2D, however. And I'm just going to edit that collider to decide what sort of an area I want my trigger to be, because when my player enters this, the music will change. So now if my player comes anywhere within that, we're going to do this. Now don't forget to make sure that it is set as a trigger. So notice now we have music playing at the start of the scene. But once I enter the trigger, we have different music playing. If I decide to turn and run, the music will go back to our default music. All right, I hope you have found that one helpful. I wish you luck as you add some music and boss fights to your own game. We'll be doing a lot more on music and sound in some upcoming videos, and I look forward to seeing you there. Until then, this is Matt with Night Run Studio. Cheers.